It was almost, yeah, he could have been like not actually in the cast. He could have been someone who was like an extra who was like, I can't believe I'm
Right,
in a movie.
exactly.
My name is Ilan.
And I'm Ariel.
And this is our show where we nerd out about films. Today we're talking about Knives Out. Please be advised, this episode will spoil the entire movie for you. So do not listen to this episode without watching the film first. You've been warned, and we will warn you again.
Yes, we will. So Knives Out is a 2019 film and was written and directed by Rian Johnson. The cast on this is really bananas. The main folks, the main players, I mean, they're all main players, but the first ones that kind of come to mind are Ana de Armas, Daniel Craig, Lakeith Stanfield, Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans, Toni Collette, Don Johnson, the formidable Christopher Plummer, Michael Shannon, Catherine Langford. I could go on. There are so many people in this film that are just a delight to watch. And if you haven't watched it and you're listening to this, go watch it and then come back. So the story, this is the synopsis that is on IMDb. When renowned crime novelist Harlan Thrombey is found dead at his estate just after his 85th birthday, the inquisitive and debonair Detective Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig, is mysteriously enlisted to investigate. From Harlan's dysfunctional family to his devoted staff, Blanc sifts through a web of red herrings and self-serving lies to uncover the truth behind Harlan's untimely death. We picked this film because it was a funny one to follow up the first film that we did, which was This Is Where I Leave You, and it surrounds the death of the patriarch of a family. And so does this one, but you could not pick a more polarizing, different context of family and the world that it encompasses. So bearing that in mind, when we think about themes of the film, what are themes of this story and this movie that stood out to you as you were watching it?
So for me, the themes, one of the biggest themes was about redemption, and also
interesting.
The patriarch of the family. I don't know what the theme would be for this, but basically trying to set things right. And that was something I was reflecting on this morning before we started recording. Was, you know, he's set up as this benevolent, kind person, and at the same time, he's really kind of fucked everyone up unwittingly, like by accident. And now in his final, you know, he says, I want to end things with a flourish. I mean, yes, there's something to that, but he's trying to make things right. And so to me, he's trying to redeem himself for accidentally really screwing over his family. And this is probably not a popular opinion or something that people are necessarily thinking about, but we're going to get into it, obviously, like the privilege, just all the privilege in there. So that's, I don't know if we can call that a theme, but that is one of the pieces that
100%
woven throughout. Privilege, race, we're going to need to talk about, of course. And then I think the other thing that I was reflecting on was layers. So I was watching a little bit with Rian Johnson breaking down a scene, and he talks about in the cinematography, which we'll talk about also, but he talks about the layers that he set up just in the frame. But I think this also applies to the story. And of course, it's a whodunit story at the same time. So of course there's layers. But that's one of the big themes to me, was the layered aspect of almost every piece of this, was the layering of the characters, the layering of the story, the layering of the cinematography, even the set itself. I've now watched the film twice, and the second time around was in some ways more enjoyable because I was able to take in the different aspects that I couldn't see the first time. What about you? Themes that you connected to, stood out to you?
Yeah, I'm really struck by what stood out to you already. And honestly, the redemption didn't even occur to me. And so I love that so much. So for me, absolutely privilege, classism. There are incredible examples and layers. Like I like how you said layers too, around the classism and the racism and the unbelievable toxic privilege. And I think that ties into what you were saying about what the main character, well, the patriarch Thrombey thought he was doing in the context of his life was incredibly privileged and presumptuous and so narrow-minded. And it's just incredible to look at. One of the things that stood out for me is the dichotomy between good and evil, and what is true goodness and what is true evil. In the context that we are seeing him, he is a mystery murder writer. So he's basically written his own ending to his own mystery murder as much as he could. And ultimately, one of the things that kept jumping out to me throughout the entire film is richness. So not just richness in wealth, but also the richness, like you just said, the layering, like the ability, the world that they're in, that they're encompassed by in this film is a feast of color and texture. And it's so layered and it's so beautiful. I mean, we have to talk about the house at some point and how it's basically its own character, but the entire world is just so vibrant and so rich, and like the layering of the scenes. And yes, like we watched that extra piece by Rian Johnson that you shared with me about setting up the scene and how many components there are to it. But the entire thing was a feast on my senses. Like it was like this visual and audio and whodunit component. Like it was just the richness. Like I kept thinking of like a very dense chocolate cake. Like it was like, there's so much here that I also saw it twice. I watched it twice. And the second time I picked up on so much more than I usually do. Like the first time I watch something. And also death. I mean, death is a huge theme of the entire film. I think those are mine.
And I'm deciding which thread to pull on. I think let's let the themes rest for a moment, because we're going to come back to all of them. I want to do what we did last time. I think this is a great to talk about the trailer. What were our first impressions? First impressions, expectations, and versus reality. So to put you on the spot, what did you watch the trailer initially? And then what were you expecting versus what did you feel like you got?
Yes, I absolutely watched the trailer, and I felt like, from what I remember of it, I feel like it tried to present a good yarn. And I remember the music being a little dramatic in a sort of fun way. And I remember being utterly distracted by all of the cast in the preview. Like there were so many famous, incredibly talented people that they kept popping up, and I'm like, wait, what? And the ability, this drives me crazy in trailers, and you'll have to tell me if you have the same problem, where in an effort to pull you in, sometimes they'll just show you like a variety of random scenes. So one of the scenes in the trailer is Marta, Ana de Armas's character, from a very pivotal part at the end of the movie, kind of putting her arms out, in this sort of extreme way in front of this wall of knives that we'll talk about later. And you have no idea what's going on. And I just felt like there were components of the trailer that just was like, okay, you're just trying to pull me in. Like I'm already intrigued, but I have no idea what's going on. And it was actually distracting for me. It took away from me. I think it was an attempt to make things like suspenseful, and I found it kind of distracting, because it's like the eye lines didn't make sense. Like nobody was looking at each other. Like it's just a smattering of scenes, like really fast. And I was like, what's happening? Yeah. But I was still interested.
Yeah.
I didn't.
No,
yeah. No. That's it.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I'll be honest. It came across probably my Amazon Prime, feed or whatever it is. And I actually ignored it. I was like, cool. There's like famous people in this. And then I'm sure their algorithm or whatever, the actual trailer played, and I got a little more interested. I'll get to what you said about the sort of overstimulation effects in a second, but I think for me the
Well
gateway,
well put.
yeah, the onslaught on the senses. To me, the gateway was Daniel Craig. I didn't, like Jamie Lee Curtis. I like her, but I haven't really followed her career, but I'm a huge Bond fan, James Bond fan. I actually literally just rewatched everything from the 4 movies from Casino Royale through Spectre. And there's also the impending newest Bond movie. But anyways, seeing his face, I was like, all right, I'll check it out. So I watched the trailer. So the gateway for me was Daniel Craig. Like, so first of all, agreed. It was just like, how much can we pack into this trailer? Let's just see what we can cram into these 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is. To me, it makes me feel a little sad, because actually this movie is so much better. There's so much nuance in the story and the characters that is lost in a trailer like that. So to go back to Daniel Craig, his performance is unreal. He is so far from being James Bond in this movie. He's, this Southern. I'm not going to do it justice. Where is he from in this film?
I think Southern of some variety, but I want to talk more about him and that character and that accent later. When we get into that. Characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one example. I think they lost something there. Daniel Craig putting on this amazing performance, as well as Ana de Armas, and her whole storyline. That's
Agreed.
Not anywhere in this trailer. And to me, what makes me sad about that is that there's this whole narrative thread about classism and racism and this nuanced story of, I don't know if I could say intersectionality being the right word here. I'm not even sure. The trailer just focused on pummeling you with action and color. And I think, beating it in horse, I guess.
Faces, right?
Yeah, and famous faces. I just feel like it lost. It just, all the things that I loved. And let me tie it back down. The things that I connected to as a human and made me feel something, those things were nowhere in the trailer and didn't feel like they were in the marketing and promotional materials to me.
Which leads me to this question. What makes a trailer successful? Like, is it just a question of pulling you in, or is it a question of doing the movie justice? Because we've talked about this before. That you shared last episode that like there are people that are in charge of the marketing, and maybe they look at the movie and they're like, we can't encompass this in a way, we can't package this in a way that will capture all of the things that you just said that were important to you, that the humanity of it. So we're just going to throw that all away and just make it all about the faces that are in it. Because one of the things that I remember, I feel like there are a few different trailers, and I remember seeing one that was very, they kept showing Chris Evans, right? Like over and over again. And I'm like, yes, he's pivotal, obviously, to the story, but there's so much buildup before that character presents. And it's like, how do we show that well? And you're right. I think up until this movie, I mean, have you seen Logan Lucky with Daniel Craig in it?
Twice, yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. So that's another role that's very out of character, in quotes, for him to usually play. And I just wonder if people marketing his non-Bond roles know how to handle it. Like, I don't know if they know what to do with it, because we will talk more about that character for sure. It was masterful. But it's so different than anything he's ever done. So they're almost like, well, we don't know how to promote this. Like, I don't know. I just wonder, like, I want to be in the room for some of these trailers. I'm like, how do we define the success of this? Is it just to get people to see it, or do we have a different goal?
I think to me, that goes back to that same thing of, we were talking about, it was in the context of the Family Stone, the director talking about,
right.
Yeah, the marketing team is very different than the the rest of the team, I guess. I don't have enough like Hollywood or whatever business all that savvy or knowledge to really comment in depth about who's sitting in the editing room, who's making those decisions about the marketing of it. I think to me, what feels like a miss in the industry is that sometimes people might be watching it, and I'm speculating, but might be watching these films in spite of the trailer rather than because of the trailer.
Absolutely.
You know, like in art, we have this idea of, well, what do they want to see out there? What does the audience want to see out there? And some of the most amazing pieces of art, and I'm talking in any genre, any medium, not just film, are the ones where someone speaks the truth, creates something that they wanted. And because they're human, you create something that other people also want. It's inevitable. And so I guess I'm speaking a little bit to like, this idea of, well, what does a mass audience want? You know, they want these fast cuts. They want to be barraged, you know, with color and sound and all this stuff and action. And it's like, well,
right.
Let's pretend that there's a couple, I don't know, micro communities or niches that would watch this movie, right? That would really like people who love mystery thriller type movies. What would the trailer look like for them if you were just making a trailer for them versus for a mass, I'm putting in quotes, a mass audience, air quotes here.
I agree with you. And I actually have to say that applies to me with this movie. I mean, we've talked before about how much we love trailers. And I definitely watched this movie after watching a trailer that I was like, okay, I love Rian Johnson's work. The cast is bananas. I don't understand what this movie is about, but I'm going to watch it because I'm intrigued because of the content that I'm aware of. But the trailer was not one that elicited excitement for me. It was sort of like, what is this? So yeah, I agree.
I think it elicited, now I think when I think about it in those terms, like it elicited dopamine from me, but it didn't elicit, you know what I mean? Like it was like, it was like adrenaline time, which I know is different than dopamine, but I'll leave that to the people in your sphere, your profession. But it did not elicit the artist in me, or you know, the film goer who was like, I want to be taken on a journey.
Yes. So to close off, to kind of loop this back to what we were saying before about themes, the movie is layered. The movie is rich. It's this delicious, incredible dessert that you just have to take your time with to appreciate. And the trailer was a leftover donut that somebody was like, you might like this. It's from this bakery that you'll really like. And the bakery is in fact actually where the movie came from.
I mean, if you're gonna, you know, I love metaphors. I think that's a metaphor, not a simile. To me, it wasn't just a leftover donut. It was more like 6 rich cakes. It was like all of the richest parts, but not in like that good rich way, like the over saccharin. Like we took Splenda and we put this into your donut, you know, like it was like a Frankenstein.
We took the icing, the beautiful icing, and we just threw some Splenda on it and presented it to you and as a coaxing mechanism to bring you to have more cake. And it's like, I don't know if I want to. Yeah,
exactly. Well, we can talk forever about the trailer, but I think, well, yeah. But yeah, I do have to ask though, like, why do we still love trailers if we're so critical?
Okay. For me, trailers are like visual poems. And
you're blowing my mind already.
When you see the right one, sorry?
I said you're blowing my mind already.
And in general, I'm not a strong poetry person, but when you hear the right one, it kind of makes your heart stop. And so having seen enough incredible trailers, and then having incredible trailers line up with incredible films, I love watching trailers and then watching the films to see what the relationship is between the two of them. And if it continues to be, if it's just this sort of expanded poetry of film telling, movie telling, storytelling like this was, or is the trailer the best of the movie, which has happened too, that I've seen trailers that just are absolute gems of just beautiful storytelling with the right music and the right editing. And then you see the movie and you're like, they put all the good stuff in the trailer. Like I don't need to see the movie because they did such a good job with the trailer. And so it's sort of like this malleable, interactive component of it that helps me think about how the movie is experienced and also how the trailer is experienced. And so I guess it's just another component of movie going and movie watching for me that's just always been a joy. Why do you like trailers?
I mean, I love what you said about it being visual poetry, essentially. I guess I have to admit that there is a part of me that wants to be overstimulated. Like there is a part of me that wants, like, I have to own that fact, right? That there's a part of me that wants to, I don't want to be lied to, right? I don't want to be shown some like weird version of the movie, and I definitely don't want to be shown major plot points before I see the movie. But there is a part of me that enjoys the adrenaline that comes with watching. I'll go back to talk about James Bond for a second, like the new movie that's coming out. Like, okay, they've taken pieces from these action sequences, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be insane, you know?
Right.
So there is that part. So I have to own that. But I think the other reason is that there's something about the story aspect and knowing that I'm going to be taken on some sort of journey. The trailer is making a promise. And I think that's something that is talked about in the marketing world, is that you're making a promise to someone who's looking at your marketing material. So I'm thinking of a trailer in that realm. That I think is where you and I agree, where trailers go wrong is the breaking of the promise.
Yes. Yes.
So I think the promise is one reason I love trailers, and one reason, and the breaking of the promise is a reason I hate trailers, you know? But the promise, to stick to the loving part of it, like I love the promise of the story, these amazing characters, the interactions, how I will feel watching the film, all of that, the promise in the trailer.
Yeah, the inviting tease of that promise is delightful when it's done right.
Yeah. I'm really afraid there's some like editor out there right now who like will someday hear this and be like, I tried my best to make this a good trailer. But we can't live our lives that way.
No, we can't. We can't live our lives that way. It's true. So we have already kind of reviewed themes of this movie, and also we talked a lot about the trailers. Obviously, we said this last time, but we're definitely going to have a whole episode about trailers.
Yes, definitely.
And sort of thinking about how much there is to take in this film, and appreciating all of the different components of movies that we've identified that we want to talk about. Let's start with cinematography and sort of how this was filmed, and appreciating that as we are introduced into the story, we start outside, and the opening credits show us this very ominous house with these dogs in slow motion running by. And it's this very dramatic scene. The house is in Massachusetts. We are located in Massachusetts. And it is, as we have talked about already, a character in and of itself. This house is bananas. And the way that they bring you into the house and then show you this house that's just so rich and so detailed and layered, and there's so much happening. And then we meet this family, and it's so rich, and there's so many details, and there's so much happening. What were you struck by with the cinematography when you watched this? And we both watched it a couple of times, and I'm really curious to hear your view on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to go in. I was struck by, so the first time around, I was struggling to take it all in. We were talking about layers before, and I think that's very true. And it was obviously very intentional. Ryan, the director Rian Johnson, talks about that. There was just so many layers once you get into the house. I was a little overwhelmed with just how much was happening behind the people in the frames with I don't even know, these various statues and like figurines and paintings, and some of them looked like puppets.
Some of them were little like creepy doll puppets. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. That is a much more apt description. It made me so the second time around, I felt like I was able to focus more on the characters. But before I get to that, I think I was feeling distracted and wondering why are we being shown these creepy puppets? You know, it was because everything is intentional, right? You don't put something in a production like this unless there's a reason to. What was the reason?
And there was so much. I mean, I had the same thing. Like, I was like, is this an important doll? Or is this doll who looks evil before we meet another character significant? Like, what? I was doing the same thing. It was almost too distracting the first time I watched it. It was almost too rich. But I was having that same thing where I was like, is this just showing me pretentiousness, or is this important?
Right. And that was the thing too, we just named about searching. Like, okay, what do I need to remember?
Right.
You know, like I need to obviously I'm here to unravel this story. And we, my wife and I spent the first time around watching it, the whole time we talked. Whenever there was a quiet moment, we were saying like, well, what if it's this? What if it's this person? What if it's this? Oh, we figured this out. Yeah, we're going back and forth. She's laughing in the background. And I feel that, so going back to what you said, it was like, I'm searching for answers and I'm trying to collect as much data as possible because I want to solve the mystery. I'm excited for that. And second time around was like, oh, those didn't seem like I needed to see those things. Why were they in there?
You know, I'm realizing now that is mirrored in the characters too. What you just described is mirrored in how we are presented the characters. So there's this parallel in how we're introduced to the house and the space that they're all in pretty much the entire time, with the exception of the awful car chase and the scene where Fran is found, and then also Marta's home apartment. But for the most part, right, we're in this house. We're in this really creepy, beautiful, rich house. And there's so much to take in. And then when we meet all of the characters in the context of the interviews with the police and the detectives, it's the same thing. There's all of this data and we're trying to be like, what's important? And it's the same. It's just a funny parallel that just occurred to me. And I'm sure it's all deliberate to confuse you because it confused me for sure.
Oh, me too. And actually, so thinking about the characters, so first time around, I'm watching it. And I don't know about you, but for me, everyone has an A in my book until proven otherwise. Okay. I think about like a reliable narrator versus an unreliable narrator. The first time I encountered that idea was, what's the book? Catcher in the Rye. Holden Caulfield being an unreliable narrator. He's full of, which I didn't really realize as a teen when I read it, but our teacher pointed it out to us. And so in Knives Out, you're getting this series of interviews with the family. And at first they all had an A in my book. I was like, oh yeah, like they're all these nice people and their patriarch just passed. Who could have done this? And then the first time I didn't even catch it, but they trip over their own lies so early into it. Yeah. Second time around, it was way funnier to watch them trip over their lies and to like undo what they just said like a minute ago, or for some other character to in their interview say the exact opposite thing about them. It was way more fun because I already knew what happened and I was able to see them just be totally
yes And also visually, all of these interviews are happening in front of this like wall of knives, and all of the knives are pointing at the person that's sitting there. So it's like, it reminded me of what's this in an old cop film when they have the light on the interrogation person, the person they're interrogating, and then in this case it was just all these knives pointing. And it was like,
oh, interesting.
like,
Yeah, because I was trying to make meaning from it too.
Yeah.
I was like, is there, if you go back, or did they change the shift? Did they shift where the knives were based on like who was guilty?
Well, but that's the thing too with those interviews, is that the person who's guilty of this particular thing, clearly they're all guilty of other things based on what we learned through the movie, but he's not interviewed.
That is a really good
So
point.
I'm just going to say again, for our folks that are listening, we're spoiling this movie. Like, if you haven't seen it, don't listen to the rest of this. But they have turn back now. But they have all of these elaborate interviews, and Ransom isn't there, and getting all of these crazy stories. I feel like we're kind of switching from cinematography to the characters, which I'm enjoying, because I have a question about the characters.
Let's do it. Yeah.
What the hell was with the piano note from Benoit when Lakeith Stanfield's character, whose name I'm spacing on, was interviewing? And I have to say, he was a black man interviewing, and there's this older white man sitting behind him, like keeping him on track. Like, what was that? Was it for the benefit to throw people off that they were interviewing? It seemed very demeaning towards the person who was interviewing. And I'm wondering what your reaction was to that.
Yeah. So Lakeith Stanfield plays Lieutenant Elliot, and he's clearly, I cheated. I'm looking at my screen right now.
That's all right.
So,
it's all good.
I wish I had a perfect memory. So yeah, Lakeith Stanfield plays Lieutenant Elliot, who's conducting the investigation. And as you said, Daniel Craig's character is in the background pressing this piano key, which I do think, the power dynamic there is very interesting. And that to me is a very confusing thing, especially given, I don't know this, I don't have a background on how this works. If he's a private detective, what real jurisdiction does he actually even have? If this were, if we're talking about real life, if any, would the cops even let him in?
Right. And he seemed to like kind of, and like Elliot kind of knew him, right? A little bit. But it seemed like he was there, and you find out later that he was hired, anonymously, but really by Ransom, because Ransom's so cocky of his plan that he thinks he can tie it all off beautifully. But yeah, is it a hierarchy because Elliot's a lieutenant and he's a detective? Like, it was so obnoxious. I felt it really, and when Toni Collette's character kind of calls it out, because no one else is asking who he is. Right.
She's like one of the few sane sort of like questions it. Yeah.
She's like, I'm sorry. And I was like, thank you, because it's driving me crazy too.
I don't want to inadvertently gloss over the racial part that you mentioned though, about, I don't know what to say about it, but there's a black detective who's clearly leading this investigation, and you have a white older
Southern
man. Yep. Good point. Man who is undermining his authority. And then, because he doesn't ask, right? He doesn't say, oh, can I interject? He's pressing a piano key.
Like, what is that? Yeah, it really bothered me.
Yeah. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know where to go from there. Look, but I think it's worth putting out.
And I think this is a good segue into Benoit.
Yeah, definitely. Before we jump to Daniel Craig, I do think also, because I doubt we're going to end up talking about him because he is a sub character. Noah Segan plays Trooper Wagner. He was a hilarious, in the second time watching it, a hilarious, just supporting role. Yes. All his little looks and his obsession with the books by Harlan Thrombey and like how he was nerding out while he was there was just hilarious. So
you're totally right. He was actually very needed lightness, I felt, through the entire film, and he maintains that lightness the whole time. He's having a blast. Yeah. That character, he's having a blast the whole time.
He's like a kid in a candy shop. He's like, I don't care about this being a murder case. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, when we were talking about the trailer that, or I was saying I didn't feel like they paid tribute to how amazing these performances were in the trailer. So circling back to that, I think this character, Benoit Blanc, just having just watched the 4 Bond movies and how he just plays this brooding person. I mean, I did watch them almost back to back in a span of a few days. So it's like 5 hours of watching Daniel Craig. Craig. Much more than that, more than 5 hours. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of brooding. And to see him play this Southern, what did they call him at one point? Kentucky Fried.
Oh yeah. There
was some perfect line about.
We'll have to find it. Kentucky Fried
Investigator or something. Yeah. I thought he did a brilliant job.
I thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed him a lot because I think he also really enjoyed it. Just a little throwback to the piano scene with this character. His last name means white, like it's Benoit Blanc. Yeah,
right. There was I thought of that, and then it left my
So
good point.
He clearly was enjoying himself with this. I'm always struck by folks from certain countries trying to take on accents from certain regions of specific parts of other countries. Mm-hmm. And I felt at times that his accent was wobbly. And I find, I don't know, if for me, it pulled me out a couple times of the movie because there were a few times where he got very Southern, it got very round in how he was talking.
Definitely at the end.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That whole monologue that he gives at the end with the reveal. And then there were a couple of times where you could hear his bass accent. And I was like, wait, what?
I'll be honest. I didn't notice it, but I think I wasn't looking for it, but I think if I were, I'd probably.
I think we all have components of films that we're more sensitive to. And for me, music and accents, I really hone in on those.
You mean like the Departed, where everyone had an accent, except for like halfway through, they're like, we don't need these accents. We're going to just go to our.
Yes, maybe a future episode on accents and The Departed. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. And he clearly was a composite. Benoit was clearly a composite of a bunch of different kind of famous detectives, sleuths. I mean, at one point he does say the game's afoot. And then there's a version before that where he says a Southern version of it, where it's not the complete saying. He reminded me a lot of Poirot from, the Agatha Christie books. And just this sort of higher power thing. But I also found him to be really goofy. And like that scene when he's waiting in the car for Marta, when she's going to pick up she doesn't know what she's picking up, or she's going for her medical bag. And he has his music on and he's singing really loudly in the car. Yep. And then he's also clearly driven to find the truth. Yeah. Yep. And this is a nice bridge moment to kind of talk about him and also talk about Marta more, but I think he's really taken by her. Like, one of the standout components of her character is the fact that she can't lie without getting physically ill.
Right.
We can let's talk about that. Like, what was that for you? But also the contrast between the two. I mean, he just seemed really taken by her in my view, because of this. She has to live truthfully, and that's what he loves.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it. I mean, they're sitting outside, I believe, and he starts talking about how he was talking about his method, that the truth reveals itself to him. He's drawn to it. He has a great line about, there's something about a rainbow. Rainbows. It's like the arc. It always goes down to always goes down. The rainbow's arc, but he references a book that he hasn't read. He's just referencing the title of the book, which I love. It's such it's like a slightly goofy thing to do. He's like, have you heard of this cool thing that I don't know anything about, but I'm just using it, a little mansplaining for us.
Gravity's rainbow or something.
Gravity's rainbow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so great. I haven't read it either.
But yeah, so their relationship you were just talking about, I think I really didn't like she throws up when she lies. It felt like a really weird, I get why they did it. Like, I get because it made it so that they could have their relationship and he could be endeared to her because he seeks the truth and she's the one person who he knows isn't lying and is true of heart, basically, because she has, in a way, because she has to be, and also because she is. And he probably deals with liars all the time. So that to me, I thought that was a cool. The relationship played out in a very nice way, and I just thought they could have given some flashback or something to explain the vomiting upon lying thing. Did they?
No,
Did I miss it?
They just, it's just there. It's just, and everybody uses it against her.
Right.
And, you know, just kind of pulling up the sort of white context again with him. He decides to take her on as his, he calls her Watson at one point, you know, and it's just like, she's the only person that wasn't using her for their own advantage, ironically, was the person who hired her. The patriarch, right? Like, they seem to have a real friendship. And I really, every other scene she had with everybody else just really bothered me because it felt like everybody was just trying to move her on their own chessboard. And as much as I think that Benoit marveled at her, I think she was still a thing to him and is still a part of getting to this truth. And I know we're kind of going around a little bit, you know, one of the things that I've wondered about with this story and him and her specifically, so specifically with Benoit and Marta, is how long did he know that she was involved because of the spot of blood on her shoe? And was he just playing along the whole time just to see what would happen?
Oh, right, because he says at the end that he knew something was
because
up. He didn't say it in those words, obviously. But.
Yeah, but he knew that she was at the center of the story because there was a spot of blood on her white shoe. And I just always wondered how long he actually knew that and how long he had just been playing. Like, it just felt like he was playing. And I don't doubt his desire for the truth, but it just felt like a game, you know?
Well, that's an interesting point, right? Because I think what you're saying is, although he was endeared to her, his desire for the truth trumps everything else. Yeah. Above people, even. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
in that way, the two of them are strong opposites because
her caretaking people trumped everything else, even the people who are terrible to her.
Right. Yeah. And can we talk about Marta now?
Oh, we are. It's long overdue.
First of all, I don't know this actress very well, and now I want to know everything about her. And you were mentioning Bond before. She's in the next Bond film with Daniel Craig, which is super cool, and I'm excited for that.
And it'll just be the same relationship,
right?
Yeah,
totally the same relationship. Oh my God, we'll have to do a comparative. So, you know, as a character, I found her not very exciting, but the acting of this character blew me away. There were a couple of scenes where she's having strong emotional reactions to things, and I'm not talking about the vomiting scenes, but sort of when she realizes what potentially happened with the medication being switched out and giving him the wrong thing, and her frantically trying to find the naloxone. Both times that I watched that part, I was so tense because he's not really tracking what's going on, and she's trying so hard to just do her job and keep him safe, and she's freaking out the whole time because it's not there because Ransom took it out. So there's that part that just kind of always just makes me, when I think about it, I'm just like, God, that was so well done. I was so scared for her. But then when she comes back upstairs and she witnesses him kill himself, and then she slams the door shut and she's on the stairs and she's processing that moment and she's freaking out, and then she pulls it together and then she does everything he told her to do. Yep. Bravo.
Yeah. Unreal. Yeah. I agree. I think she held this whole thing together with her performance. Yes. I think casting someone else casting someone else could have ruined this movie. You know, I like her ability to really, she humanized this entire film.
Yes, well put. Well put. She really did.
What I said, I wrote a note to myself that said Daniel Craig pulled me in to want to watch the film because I hadn't heard of, I heard a couple of obviously some of the other actors in it. He pulled me in, like he was sort of the gateway, as I said earlier, and we were talking about trailers. But Marta stole my heart, right? Like I was endeared to her. I was like, this is a real person who cares, who's true. And also the other thing that I wanted to say, because we started to talk about, it's related to story and her character, is that, so she can't lie. And it's all about her being very true and being kind. And I think some of the best stories, the people change. You don't see change from the family. They're the worst for the whole. They're the worst at the beginning, and they're terrible at the end. And even when you think people like Ransom, he pretends to change and actually isn't, right? But Marta can't lie at the beginning, and at the end, she still can't lie, but she lies long enough to get the right thing done, right? Which is to get Ransom to implicate himself in his own crime. And to me, that was, and I'm sure I would love to hear what how you think she changed as a character, if I consider her the protagonist in the story. But that was a huge change, is that, how to put this, like, it felt like her weakness was this inability to lie. And that in order to achieve the higher truth, which is justice, I guess, she lied long enough to do that. So I think about the character arc as very satisfying. And of course, at the end, we should talk about this more later, but she's literally standing on the porch.
Oh my gosh. That's all I was thinking of just now when you said that. So I love your explanation of her arc, because I think part of the strength and also challenge with this movie is there are so many threads, and we are deliberately misled in how they're crossing each other, all the story arcs, right? And her arc for the first time I saw it, I was like, what's the point? I don't understand. The second time I saw it, yes, you're absolutely right. She pulls the story through, and you realize how significant she is to the crime that she doesn't even know happened. It's just, gosh, Ransom's awful. He's just an awful character. And the first time I saw the movie, when she's literally standing over this group of people, these vile, greedy, selfish, privileged, racist people, I actually thought it was because she was actually bad. Like, I thought she had done something sneaky to end up like that. She was actually the bad guy. But in the second time, I realized that it's actually, she really is just better than them. She's just a better human, and this is above them. And there was something to the mug that she's holding at the end when she's wrapped in it. That was his mug. That was oh my gosh, I'm spacing on the patriarch's name. Christopher Plummer's character. Richard?
Well,
no, that's the son.
Harlan
Thank
Thrombey.
You. Harlan Thrombey. And
what does it say? My house, my coffee,
rules.
My coffee, my rules.
Yeah. And just that sort of intimacy of that friendship, but also her just like, he gave it all to her. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I loved before when you said, that there was a theme of redemption, and I think it was executed poorly, but it was there nonetheless. And that last scene where she's just looking down on all of them. But you're right. Her ability to kind of evolve enough and to change a little bit, I think is noteworthy to kind of appreciate when you see it, when you can fully see it. This seems like a good switch point to talk about Ransom.
Yeah, and we should talk. I mean, this whole cast
the cast is insane.
The cast is insane. So I've been talking about Chris Evans.
Oh my gosh.
You and I both watched the Vanity Fair video that Rian Johnson did, breaking down a scene, but he also gives a lot of cool insights. We can put the link to that video in the show notes. But one of the things he says, he references Star Wars, and he talks about Han Solo not showing up until 45 minutes into the movie.
Yep.
And he didn't directly say this, but he seems like he's saying, I liked that he liked that idea, and that there's something about introducing a character so late in the game, but his presence, he was taking up a lot of space long before he ever shows up in the film. And as you said, he's not even interviewed by the detectives.
Right.
So I guess I'll say, like, when I think about movies I've seen people in, and then when they go to a different role, I mean, Chris Evans plays Captain America, and it was just so fucking awesome. I'm going to bleep myself out later. It was awesome to see him play just this terrible person. Disgusting human. Yeah. I mean, because Captain America is a very vanilla role, and they even make jokes about that in the Avengers movie, because that he is so
he doesn't
vanilla.
like swearing. Right.
Yeah. Language, guys. For Avengers fans, you'll know what we're talking about. But yeah, to see him play this vile, and he's so. I have this like sick feeling in my stomach thinking about the faces he made,
God,
and
totally.
like how like just.
I'm making faces right now.
Yeah, the word privilege is not it's not the right word. It's like help me out.
So so he's being reprimanded. It's the cookie scene where they're all yelling at him, and somebody yells at him, and he clearly looks over at somebody else, and he kind of mouths, "Wow," like the idea that nobody can touch him was prevalent through the entire film. He really thought he was better than everybody else. Ironically, with the person who was the most better than any of them, which was Marta. Ironically, what I wrote down for him was, so his speech at the end when he's trying to defend himself and talking about, Marta taking away their ancestral home, and Benoit starts laughing at him because he's like, he bought this in the 80s. What are you talking about? What I wrote, that was such a great moment. But what I wrote down for that was white, ugly privilege. That's what I wrote down for him. And one of the pivotal scenes for me that really drives that home is when he has seemingly rescued Marta from the family, and he takes her to the restaurant and feeds her, and then asks for a bowl. He has been planning this the whole time, because now he's going to ask her things that he knows she can't lie about. Yeah. And that is the epitome of structural, institutional, psychological privilege. He has completely manipulated everything that we've seen up to this point, including that restaurant scene.
So two things on that. One,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So that's like, it's interesting. You talk about you didn't use this word, but he's orchestrated this, right? Like he's set this all up, and that ties into the game of Go that they play, right?
Oh, wow. Good point.
Yeah. I mean, Harlan Thrombey plays Go with two people, Ransom
and Marta.
And Marta. And they're the only two. What is it? Both of them can beat him, or only Marta can beat him? I'm forgetting now.
So they both beat him, but Ransom.
She's the only other person who could beat him.
Ransom thought that he was the only one.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there you go. And so that ties also into this good and evil and justice piece, because when the beginning of the movie, when they're setting this up and Harlan and Marta are playing, he's like, "Why can't I beat you at this?" And she goes, "Because you're playing to win, and I'm just trying to make something beautiful." I'm misquoting.
She's just trying to make a beautiful pattern on the board. Right.
Exactly. And that speaks to their life philosophies.
Oh, yeah. Well done.
And that's why I would say that's why Ransom can't beat him, because he's playing the same game and Marta's not playing the game.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And there are a couple of times where Harlan kind of laughs off Ransom's behavior because he reminds him so much of him. right? So that kind of hones into what you just said. Like they're playing the same game, so they can't.
Yeah, he's created that monster.
He has 100%. He knows it. Yeah.
I said two things I was going to say, and I said one of them, but now I'm forgetting the other one about Ransom. You were talking about the bowl. Oh. And so they're in the restaurant and he asks for a second bowl. And then you realize he's asked for it because he's like, she's going to barf into this bowl because I've set this all up. There was a part of me the first time I watched it, so this is watching it fresh, no whatever, that thought, oh, he's about to get projectiled all over him. I was waiting for it. And it doesn't happen because she decides to confide in him. And the second time around, I didn't even realize this the first time around, but the second time I watched the film, it's like, oh, that was foreshadowing, right? Because at the end of the movie, she right when she finally fulfills her like dramatic need basically to learn to lie, essentially, he just gets on his, he's also wearing a white sweater in the restaurant earlier in the movie, and I was doing, rubbing my hands like, here we go, like he's gonna get chili all over him, this terrible character.
Oh, he's so I've heard repeatedly from actors who've played really vile characters that it's really fun to play someone so different or so nasty. And I just wonder how much fun he had with that character, because he's just awful. That whole family. I just need to give a little shout out to Michael Shannon, who played...
No, we need to talk about all the rest of the cast. I mean, there's so much. Yeah. Come on.
Holy crap. Everyone. They were outstanding. I love Michael Shannon a lot. I love his work. He does a lot of different things, and they're in the Vanity Fair video that we'll share at the end of this. Rian Johnson talks about how there are a few components in the film that Michael Shannon just kind of did, that he improvised, and it worked so beautifully. But one of the scenes that his character was very interesting, because he presents as very soft and timid at times, but he's actually very formidable. And his son is a baby Nazi. Like, that was terrifying. That character didn't have a lot of screen time, but when he did, he was really scary. But Michael Shannon, that scene when he's come to Marta's house and he's trying to appeal to her, and he's being really soft with her, and then they deliberately cut in scenes. He has a foot injury, so he has a cane. And so he's very softly talking to her, and then there are these pounding down of the cane every time he comes closer to her, and he's physically bigger than her, and he's kind of lurched over her. And just the contrast of the softness and the absolute terrifying vibe that he's giving with this cane and leaning over her, I was just like, that's privilege threat perfectly presented, but also he's very good at using his body to explain himself in spaces, and I thought that was a really good example of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of that as a pivotal scene. That's a really good point. Because so in the setup of the movie, I keep saying the setup, so I should explain that too. Like, as you're being introduced to all the characters, right? As the exposition is sort of unfolding in the first act. It was one way to put it if you're talking screenwriting, terms. Like, in the setup of the film, all of the family members present this facade of, Marta, you're part of our family.
Actual family, in quotes. She's actual family, right?
In quotes, right? Yeah. And I think you see the unraveling of that, and the self, like them countering themselves also. I mean, when they say, oh, this is Marta, she's from, and then every time someone says where she's from, they say the wrong and a different name of a country. Yeah. Which is it's just cringe-tastic. It's done. Yeah. So going back to this idea of it being a pivotal scene, I think when he shows up at her door, and he's, as you said, appealing to her, and they make it very dramatic. And this is one of the first times that it's sort of a turning point of, oh, okay, it's clear we don't give any F's about you, Marta. We want our money.
Yes.
This is what this is really about. Even though it was like when he could no longer pretend because he was desperate, and he realized, he says, we'll use all of our resources to help you out with our lawyers. And there's this long pause, and she's like, don't you mean my resources?
Yes.
And it's also for her a turning point, because it's one of the first times you see her not take, just sort of like,
yeah, I mean, she wasn't polite. Yeah, she wasn't backing away. She wasn't letting him overpower her. And that pause made me very nervous the first time I watched this movie, because I genuinely wasn't sure, because you're right. Up until that point, she's incredibly soft, and she's incredibly kind and gentle, and doesn't want to, upset anybody. And I didn't know what she was going to say the first time, and I got really nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. That's when things turned for her.
Yeah. That's when they start to turn, at least. Yeah.
So
the rest of this.
I was just going to say, I think if we try to talk about everybody, this is going to be like a 3-hour episode. So
that's fair. Let's make a couple mentions.
Yes. And then, let's do a couple mentions, but then I want to know who your favorite character was, if you had one.
Yeah, of course.
But go ahead. Who do you want to mention?
So it feels like a little bit stupid to me. I'm just going to briefly mention that when you look up the cast for Knives Out, you see that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is on.
Oh my gosh, right.
So I guess you didn't look it up since we've spoken. He has a audio cameo. He's not seen on screen ever. Yeah. He's in the opening narration. I have to go back and listen, because to be honest, I'm still unclear where he's in there. I don't even remember there being narration. Anyways, so it also feels a little weird, because I'm looking at it on Google now, and he's the fourth one in, his face is the fourth one to show up. I don't know if it's filtered by
it's like the name over the content, right?
Yeah. So he's got a cameo. Try to find it if you're going to watch the movie again, to our listeners. I do love Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I do want to mention this other piece. This is a little bit of a tangent, but so I didn't realize this till I'd seen it the first time, but Rian Johnson directed a movie called Brick.
Oh, yeah.
So you've seen it? So this movie has a special place in my heart. I was studying film at UMass. My friend Rob said, hey, there's this film. It's playing in your hometown. Let's drive 2 hours to see it tonight. And I was like, okay. And we go see this film. And it was so amazing to me. It was a game changer to me, because it was clearly not Hollywood,
right?
But at the same time, it was like, if there's a spectrum from student film to Hollywood production, it was somewhere just just the middle.
Agree.
And Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in it, and there's probably a couple of people who I'm not remembering, because I haven't looked at it in a while, but just cinematography wise, it was an amazing film. And I don't know, I could be off base here, but I see the evolution of Rian Johnson as a director from that film to this one. I see some sort of and also even the look of the film. Just if I big picture it, I can see some similarities in them. But now I have to go back and watch Brick.
So clearly, we're going to have a future episode about that movie,
and maybe Looper, which I've never seen.
Oh, okay. We're going to go off on a tangent here.
Wait, have you seen Looper? You need to say the line to me.
Oh my gosh.
What, you've never seen that?
Sorry. Wait, you've never seen Looper? I was like, oh my God, which line from the movie do you mean? So clearly we have to do some sort of anthology of directors, because I have different feelings about Brick and Looper. And then also, of course, I think Rian Johnson's a more well-known name now because of Star Wars, and so there's a lot of feelings about all of that. So you can't say that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was your favorite character.
No, absolutely not. So I went on a tangent. You're being a great anchor, bringing me back. I feel like this is what happened to me last time when we talked about, on our last episode, when we talked about Adam Driver. It's hard for it not to be Marta, I think if I choose the most, so I'm going to give 2 categories to myself to make it easier. You can feel free to do the same. The most entertaining,
yes,
was Detective Benoit. Like I found him to be the most entertaining, and he brought a unique flavor to this film. But again, I think I said it before, Marta's character and Ana de Armas's performance was the heart of this whole thing. And as I've wanted to feel more emotion when watching films, she killed it. So in those
was amazing. I mean, I already talked about my favorite scenes, but like, holy moly, she's so grounding in her presentation. I agree with you completely. So I struggle with this film when it comes to a favorite character, because I didn't really like any of the characters. I mean, certainly Marta holds heart, and she holds honesty and truth in a beautiful way. And but I said earlier, it wasn't a very exciting role for me to watch, but it was very well done. In the themes of what you're saying about most entertaining, Ransom, I was like, I literally don't know what this psychopath is going to do next, and I'm intrigued. I will say that the second time around, my favorite character was Great Nana Juanetta. So this is Harlan's mother. Nobody knows how old she is. She's wearing at least 6 coats, and she is verbal. We know this because she's actually key to the story, because she saw Ransom twice that night.
Right.
She thinks that Marta is him at one part. But my favorite scene with her is when Benoit is trying to talk to her, and he's like, I'll just sit here and wait. And she's completely oblivious.
I love that, because they make you think that she's gonna say some wise thing, and then like, the story's gonna go in this whole direction because of her. And he's like, I know there's some sort of, I'm misquoting him, but like, I know there's some sort of truth somewhere in there. And it's like, there is, but you're not going to get it
from her. And he's so pretentious in his role, and he's just like, I'm just going to sit and wait. And then he like just kind of leans back, and then they pull out from the scene. The camera pulls out, and you're just like, dude, you're going to be there for such a long time.
Oh my God. But yeah, she was great. Played by Kay Callan.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes. Yeah. What were your thoughts about music in this film?
Yeah, so I think that's a good wrap on characters. I think, I'm going to use this opportunity of a section break to go to the bathroom.
Good.
Because I've been drinking that beer. So I will cut this part out. Or maybe we'll leave it in. Who knows? It's the show game.
It's not the B game.
Let's talk music.
Let's do it.
I think I defer to you. I guess I wasn't much attuned to the music. I thought it did its job. I was much more focused on like the characters and the story. Yeah. What were your thoughts?
I like how you said that. It reminds me, I would say a similar thing about costumes. It wasn't an arena that jumped out to me at all. It just kind of did its job. There was the instrumental orchestral stuff that happened throughout the film had a very suspense, old movie suspense vibe to it. And there were a couple of sequences in the beginning of the movie where I thought the soundtrack would go a different way, because it reminded me of other old movies, other
detective,
mystery,
like, thriller,
right?
Yeah, mystery.
But there was one song that I wanted to draw attention to. So in the scene in the bar with Ransom and Marta, there's this beautiful song in the background, and it's called Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot. And the lyrics of the song are all about how, at sundown, you have to be careful. And it's all about being mindful of where you're going in the future. And that song in that scene was just like perfection for me. It was sort of like, it's a warning. The song is a warning, and she's in the pit with this snake, and we don't know who to trust at that point. And it's a beautiful song too. I highly recommend listening to it, but it was just a very beautiful moment. But besides that, I don't think it really jumped out at me, and I wasn't sure if you'd had any other thoughts on it.
No, I think it was done. I'm going to remember later who I'm quoting, but there was a director who talked about that the music can be the backdrop for the film, or the film can be the backdrop to the music. And I think generally speaking, Hollywood movies, the music is not in the fore, which makes sense. It's a visual medium. And in this movie, I think that's what it was, but it'd be interesting to think about movies where that's not the case.
Yeah. I'm going to make note of that, because there absolutely are. And then there are also movies where certain characters have certain musical pieces that are associated with them. And then it's how they interlay with other characters and their thematic music. Like, it's actually really interesting. So we should definitely talk about that. I remember that you wanted to talk about favorite lines or LOL moments. And I think that might be a perfect end segment. So I'd love to hear what you thought about that.
I'm reading my notes and I'm already laughing. So one of the first ones is they're about to start the will reading, the reading of the will, and the family's all gathering.
Footnote. Sorry. Do you know who the lawyer was for the will reading?
Frank Oz.
From Fozzie the Bear and all of that fame. Sorry. I just love that about him.
I actually did not realize. Wait, was he the voice of Fozzie the Bear? Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to go down that rabbit hole. That
is the Frank Oz. He has done a lot. He's also directed some films. But anyway, back to your moment. I'm so sorry. So it's about the reading of the will.
So there's this line that Benoit says where I think Marta asks. They're about to go into the will reading, and Benoit's like, "Oh, you're not going to be missing much if you don't come to this. It's like a community theater production of a tax return." And I just thought, his delivery was great, but also just the visual, like the jokes that really hit for me in life and in movies are if I picture what that would look like. And we've probably all seen community theater, or maybe like plays put on in like middle school. Like if you picture what that would look like, it's just even just vaguely, it tickled me.
That is amazing.
I have other ones, but I want to go. We can play tennis with this LOL moments.
Sure. I don't feel like I had a lot of strong LOL moments. I had some favorite lines, but one that I'll just say is sort of a favorite line that I was like it was being bellowed at me the second time I watched this movie. Harlan says this after the whole mix up with the medication. It's happened and she's freaking out. Marta's freaking out, trying to figure out what to do. And he says, if someone switched the meds on purpose, I'd be dead. And it's like before we know anything else about anyone's context or anything. And I'm like, okay, I know he's written murder mysteries his whole life, but does he know something? Like, like what was his, but it's just his brain. And the fact that we know that him and Ransom are very similar spirits. It's just it just stood out to me at the time when I watched it the second time.
Wait, it's not hitting me. I don't get it. What does he say?
The line is, if someone switched the meds on purpose, I'd be dead.
Oh, it's almost like, it's not irony,
but it's like foreshadows with a capital F.
Yeah. WTF, F standing for foreshadow.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
What are your other LOL lines? I really like that one that you pulled out. That was amazing.
So the funny thing is that I didn't notice any of these till the second time around. So another one, and Rian Johnson says that this was improvised, which I think makes it that much better. They are confronting Ransom for just being a total piece of crap. And they say, this is the best thing for you, that you're not in the will. They haven't found out yet that they're not in the will either. So he's very self-satisfied. And then he starts saying,
eat shit.
And he says, eat shit to each of them, and I'll get to the fun fact about that in a second, but he says, eat shit. And then this sets off this sort of explosion of reactions from the whole family yelling at him. And
Michael Shannon,
Yeah, Michael Shannon is like, you hear him and it's not highlighted. It's right after, as the scene is ending, he yells, "I'm not eating one iota of shit."
No, I love that.
I'm not eating one iota of shit. And it's just like, it's
so good.
I think it's so funny because it's like, it's this idea of trying to be forceful and trying to rebut, and actually making yourself look even stupider.
Which is his character the whole time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
The brilliance of him is that we found out in that Vanity Fair video that was completely ad-libbed, right?
Right.
But he was like in full character, and he just gave more power to that character, and how ridiculous he is. Like, it was perfect.
Yeah, so that's the fun fact. He just like improvised that. I think that was the fun fact.
I think it was. Yeah, didn't mean to steal that from you.
No. I just want to make sure that I looped back to it.
Yeah.
The other, well, no, let's play tennis. Do you have another one? I can keep going.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I don't remember which scene this is from, but I had to. I was my handwriting is bad because I was laughing while I wrote it. So they're talking about. Hold on, I need to. They're talking about Jaden Martell's character, Jacob Thromby. You know, he's painted as like they basically say like a Nazi youth. Hold on one. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was literally receiving a delivery right now. I didn't know if he was going to make me sign for it. Let me start that over. So this one, Jaden Martell's character, Jacob Thromby, they're talking about him, and he's painted as like a Nazi troll, I guess, on the internet. It never becomes a thing. Yeah. It's just like, it's sort of said a lot of times. Yeah, they call
him baby Nazi and other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So at one point, and I think he, just to give him credit, he plays that character very well. He's very aloof,
totally,
and quiet, and he's just very much like a teen on his phone
with a crisp shirt and a V and a vest and a yes.
Like too good for anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they're referring to him at one point, and I think they ask where he is or something, and someone, I don't remember who delivered this line, could look it up later. Someone says, "Oh, he's probably."
This is awesome.
I think it's he's probably joylessly masturbating to pictures of dead deer. Like the idea of joylessly masturbating, like we can't go down that rabbit hole, I don't think, but like just I didn't notice it the first time. It was like a throwaway, like it wasn't, we were moving through the scene. It wasn't like a pause on that line. It
packs a punch because it really gives you a sense of what everyone thinks of him. And also, he really is joyless in the entire film. Like every time you see this character, he's completely flat or completely dissociated. Yep. It's like perfect and disgusting at the same time.
Yeah, seriously.
Do you have one more for us?
The last one, I think I would just say it was about Toni Collette's character, and she's just done nothing with her life. Essentially, she's just what did someone say? She sunk her teeth into the teat of this family or something.
Yes. That was Ransom, I'm pretty sure.
That was Ransom. Yeah. So I thought that was a good line in itself, but they're talking about her and someone's like, well, she's an influencer. Have you seen her Insta? And there's a lot of like, it's funny because this whole film is overlaid on this very ancestral home in quotes, like backdrop. But then there's just so much pop culture almost like woven in very subtly throughout, have you seen her Insta?
That was the cop. That was Noah's character. The one who's having a field day the whole time. He's like, oh, but she's she's very, very influential. Yeah.
That's why it tickled me. I'm just realizing you said it. Yeah. Trooper Wagner, because of the way he said it, like this fanboy.
Yes.
Like
he was basically a fanboy the whole time. He was just in heaven.
It was almost, he could have been like not actually in the cast. He could have been someone who was like an extra who was like, I can't believe I'm in a movie.
Exactly.
So those are my top LOL lines.
Those are awesome. And I had forgotten about the iota of shit one. That was so good.
I'm not eating one iota of shit.
So good.
Oh my God.
I think, are we?
Yeah, I think so. I want to call back to a line that to sort of start to close this out, and then we can figure out what we want to conclude with. But a line that Harlan Thrombey says at the beginning of the film before his demise, he says, I was hoping to close with a flourish, to basically close his book of his life with a flourish. And I think it's interesting to think about how this character does that he just like unravels his family. And something we were talking about earlier about redemption, trying to right the wrongs that you've done, even just by accident, that he recognizes he's created a lot of the problems, or he's co-created a lot of the problems in his family. And it's like this film is that flourish. Like this whole plot to this film is the flourish that he's closed with.
I think you just kind of summed up the movie really well, because I was just thinking, how do we want to kind of tie off, right? Like, what is this movie about? And that's it. You just said it. The movie is the creation of the product of what he wanted. And certainly there were pieces that I don't think he was necessarily expecting, like having to slit his own throat. But he also did that on his own terms, ultimately. I mean, he owned that space when it happened, and then created this whole cascade of things that happened afterwards that were wild to watch as a story. It's sort of like it's redemption that tripped on itself on the way out.
Nice. That's a great, love that. But yeah, and I think, if we think about the closing, going back to the closing frame, the last shot of the film with, Marta is standing on the porch. It's probably a better word than porch, but she's standing above everyone else. And that to me ends up being this redemption piece. I think a good way to close out actually would be to talk about the ending and how we feel about it. Do we feel like it resolved what was unresolved? One thing that I would answer my own question is I think what I felt unresolved about is the film is satisfying. You get justice in the end, the good wins, the good person wins, good wins over evil. The privileged family then has to go figure out their stuff, but Marta wins. She basically gains an empire by
goodness,
by just being a good person. So that is, that's like one piece. What I struggle with is the idea that that's not how the world works. And like winning the lottery, that's kind of, in a way, it's like she won the lottery at the same time. And that's not, there's justice in the film. I guess what I'm thinking about is like in the real world, this isn't like something that happens, right? Generally speaking.
Maybe that's why it's so satisfying in the movie, because we just know, there's a part of us that knows that this isn't really, unfortunately, how things end. I guess for me, I like this ending with the ending. Because yes, visually she is above them. She's up on that porch. She's holding the mug of her friend and has acquired all of this wealth and stature with it. I think it's important to remember that all of those components have their own challenges, and certainly she'll have a lot to deal with. And I think that, I don't want to say it was glossed over, but certainly the ultimate point I think that the ending is trying to make is that if we're looking at people on a hierarchy of evil and good, it could not be more clear where everyone fits on that hierarchy, with Ransom off frame because he's not even worthy of the space because he's arrested for many things. I think the ending works. And again, thinking about the beginning of the film and how we start outside looking at the house, and we're coming at it from the ground. So we're looking at it coming through the grounds, and the dogs are there, and the house is looming up over us. The film ends with us kind of looking down at the house, and she's above and they're below. And sort of visually, the tables have completely changed. Everything, the structure of this class and structural space of this family and this person and the context has completely shifted. And I do think that does work for the film, but in some ways, yeah, it's a little bit fairy tale-ish. You're right.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think I like what you said about it in the film. It's satisfying because it's a film.
Right.
I think maybe that's part of it, is it's hard to wrestle with that. Like, yeah, this is fiction.
I think part of the struggle too is that it's fiction that had a lot of real world issues in it. I mean,
yeah,
it presents privilege, white privilege, rich privilege in ways that were made my skin crawl because they were so accurate. And, at one point somebody refers to her as the help, and somebody in the family gets all offended about it. And then they proceed to treat her like crap, later on. And it's sort of like, how does this all shake out? And I think in this story, it shook out with the person who was being treated the worst winning, which is really nice to see.
Yeah. Ending with the ending.
I love it.
Well, that's a great place to close.
It sure is.
Episode 2 in the books. For all of our people listening, we appreciate you.
Thank you for being on this journey with us.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Till next time.
I feel like this, as our sophomore attempt, I feel good. Do we need some sort of sign off line that really like this has been the show game?
We do.
The show game is brought to you by a love of film.
I mean, that works.
It's all right. We'll just play it out with music.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Cue our outro.